Do you believe in God? This is one of these generic questions that religious believers will ask you with all the candor of the world, ignoring that it is also one of the most stupid questions that can exist. Or rather, religious believers are not really candid. At least they are never when they ask you this question. Or else they imagine that you are lost and that you have to start by the start to hope to bring you back in the right path, or else they are already convinced that you are driving for the devil, and they believe that they are going to youEquip and force you to admit your diabolical allegiance.In the narrow mind of the religious believer. There are God and his angels, the devil and his demons, and men must choose their camp between these two options straight from them. Vast world of superstitions. There is no more narrow mind than the mind of a religious believer, and there is no better accomplishment of stupidity than the reasoning of a religious believer when spiritual questions and philosophical questions are inGame. Do you believe in God? When a religious believer asks you this question, he demonstrates his total mental incapacity to gain cultural height. There are in the world, throughout history and in the present, a wide variety of belief systems, which are called religions when these systems have the strength of social presence, and that are called sects and systems lack the necessary social presence force to obtain respect for public institutions. Yes, there are a wide variety of belief systems in the world, and the reason why there is not a single system of beliefs on the scale of humanity, it is because it exists enough fundamental differences between belief systems, so that these systems refuse to blend into each other and feel the need to maintain their own identity. One of the implications of this historical and current fact is that the doctrines of these belief systems are not soluble in each other. They say things sufficiently different and specific on the questions they approach, and they consider that these things are sufficiently important and fundamental so as not to accept to blend into other doctrines. On the question of God, this means that each system of beliefs has its specific conception of God, which is not soluble in the conceptions of others. Dreamed idealists often advance the idea that basically all belief systems say the same thing. But this posture, intellectually dishonest, when it is not a pure expression of stupidity or ignorance, is a negation of historical and current reality. If you refuse to take into account the massive data, or if you simply have no solid knowledge of the massive doctrinal data of a system of beliefs, namely its sacred texts, its historical exegeeses, its defined dogmas, and his specific articles of faith, and if you overwhelm him with a simplistic affirmation that comes only from yourself and want to pass for the quintessence of the doctrine of this belief system, and if you mentally do this operation for all belief systems, then you can lead to this absurd and false conclusion that all belief systems fundamentally say the same thing. It's just not true that all belief systems fundamentally say the same thing. There are enough fundamental differences for these systems to be distinguished from each other, and each retain their specific identity. They are not interchangeable, they are not indifferentable, they are not soluble in each other, and it is not only for questions of superficial particularities. There are necessarily common points between different belief systems, as there may be physical resemblances between two people, or cultural resemblances between two nations, or conceptual resemblances between two philosophical systems, but intellectual honesty allows not to confusings and respect the uniqueness of everything.To say that all belief systems say the same thing fundamentally. It is either pure ignorance concerning doctrines or pure intellectual dishonesty. In both cases, any intelligent discussion is impossible with a person who camps on such a posture. There are as many conceptions of God as there are belief systems, and there is no consensus, neither historical nor current, on what should be the one and only good conception of God.B. Why asking the question of whether you believe in God, the religious believer places himself on the implicit of an infinite arrogance, which he immediately rejects the conceptions of God of other belief systems as false, and he places himself on the implicit of infinite arrogance that his conception of God is obviously the only true, fair, and good. There is nothing arrogant in asking a person if they believe in such or such specific conception of God, knowing that it is a conception among several others, and remembering that in history and in the present, no particular conception has been able to demonstrate irrefutable of its accuracy. Infinite arrogance, and in fact stupidity. In asking a person if they believe in God, believing that a universal and relevant concept is mentioned. The blindness of the religious believer is such that it is mentally unable to take sufficient cultural, historical, and current height to see that its system of beliefs is only a system among several others, which has never managed to establish the proof that he would be holding the truth. A belief system that should realize that it is just as relative as other belief systems. Many religious believers have experiences, which we will describe here as experiences of contact with the invisible, and they believe that these experiences are proof of the correctness of the belief system to which they adhere. Drunk with their own experiences and unable to once again take cultural, historical, and current height, they do not see only many other religious believers, adhering to other belief systems, also have experiences of contact with the invisible that give these other believers that their belief system is necessarily relevant, since lived experiences seem to be obviously confirmation and demonstration. Blinded by the feeling of confirmation and demonstration given to them by their experiences with regard to their system of beliefs, the religious believers who live these experiences are unable to gain intellectual height, and their mind is completely dominated by the feeling that they have. Their mind will then serve as a manufacturer of reasoning to abound in the sense of the feeling that they already have. They are convinced that their experiences are proof that their belief system is not a system of beliefs, but that it is the pure expression of absolute truth. And in many cases, they do not even have experiences of contact with the invisible. They only have experiences of emotional exaltation, because they would have witnessed things that they interpreted as miracles.It must be said with irony. The good religious believer is a person who is mentally and emotionally convinced that the system of beliefs to which he adheres is not a system of beliefs, but that he is the one and only expression of the absolute truth on earth. He considers you an lost, a blind, an ignorant, a disbeliever, a damned, or as an enemy supposed, if you do not adhere to his system of beliefs. Or else he will try to save you, trying to convince you to join his belief system, or he will nourish the animosity more or less manifested towards you if he is convinced that you are an agent of the enemy. Or he will pray for you, so that God touches your heart, or he will send fire to you to destroy your works.It must be repeated with irony. The good believer is mentally in one of the most successful forms of stupidity with regard to spiritual questions and philosophical questions, and he is incapable of the slightest intelligent reflection on these questions. If you are able to use your intellect to reflect on spiritual questions and philosophical questions, do not try to have a discussion on these questions with a religious believer, lest you have some secret pleasure to waste your time and your energy.Do you believe in God? Understand that this is an obviously stupid question asked by people who are spiritually stupid. You know the term is not too strong, and too bad for emotional people who will be offended by hearing me using such words. It is their problem. The diversity of belief systems is in itself the demonstration of the non-existence of a concept of God which is consensual and even less universal. Talking about God with no other nuance is either absolute arrogance or absolute stupidity. And there are not many differences between absolute arrogance and absolute stupidity. To think the question in binary terms of believing or not to believe in God is one of the most advanced expressions of stupidity. For what? Because each concept of God is at best a hypothesis of answer on the question of what is the nature of the absolute origin of the cosmos. However, A question of the nature of the absolute origin of the cosmos is itself a question which only makes sense in the context of a specific hypothesis among several others, the hypothesis which supposes that there would be an absolute origin to the existence of the cosmos.I. In essence, the cosmos can very well be eternal, that is to say, without beginning and endless, existing forever and forever, although phenomena, things and entities can be born and die within it. The idea that the cosmos has an origin is a hypothesis, and it is only within the framework of this specific hypothesis that the hypothesis of an entity having created the cosmos can be formulated. But it is also possible that the cosmos has an origin, but that this origin has nothing to do with any entity, but has everything to do with the mechanics of impersonal forces. For an intelligent intellect, the question of origin is a rich and complex question, and always open. For a stupid mind, it's about asking yourself whether or not you believe in God,